Hello, everybody, and welcome to Overcoming Math-Phobia. I see that we are starting to get some participants in, so we're going to hold off for a moment to begin the presentation. But while we're waiting, what I would really love is if you would put in to the chat the ages of the students that you're thinking of, or maybe it's for yourself. You're here to learn some strategies and tips about overcoming your own math phobia. I would love to know a little bit more about the students that you're thinking of and their ages, and any other particular things. If you have questions that you would like answered throughout, then stick them in the chat, and we'll just give that a moment and see where we go with it. See who is out there. There's Chris. He's joining us. He's our special guest this evening. And let's see what we've got. I'm going to just open up the chat. Usually it takes a few minutes for all of the participants to trickle in, and hopefully we'll see a bunch of people come in a few moments. But in the meantime, I will reintroduce myself again in a moment, but for now, I'm Ruth Rumak. I am the founder and executive director of education of Ruth Rumak's Learning Space. And today we have Chris Scott with us, who is one of our fantastic math specialists. And he's going to share a whole bunch of strategies with us. And I'm very excited to have a conversation with him because we chat all the time and fantastic ideas come out, and this is actually a lovely forum for us to be able to share them with other people, not just between ourselves. So
absolutely, yeah. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. All right, so I'm just going to repeat what I said a moment ago. If you're just joining us, come on in. Welcome. This is our first, I think this is our first webinar in the new year. So this is our first 2022 webinar. And it's a great one to start with because I know firsthand how many students struggle with feelings of anxiety around math. And we're going to delve into that in just a few minutes in terms of where that comes from, what we can do about it, what we can do as parents, what we can do as mentors and modelers of good behavior, good math behavior. But just before we begin, I would love to have those people who are with us throw into the chat for me, what are the ages of the students that you are here to learn more about or for? Or is it for yourself? Are you a student yourself? I would love to know a little bit more about who we have in the audience. So take a moment right now and stick that in the chat. How old are the kids, or what grades are they in? So Amy says daughter is 9 years old in grade 4. So that's a junior side. 8, 11, and 13. Excellent. Oh, sorry, that was Amy was 8, 11, and 13, and Mike is 9-year-old daughter in grade 4. So we've got sort of a range right now in that junior heading towards intermediate realm, which is great. And we have lots of tips and strategies and ideas for all ages tonight. So hopefully there will be something for everybody. We've got a 12-year-old in grade 6 from David. Thank you. Excellent. And anybody else who would like to throw into the chat the ages of the students that they're thinking of, because this will kind of help us guide our discussion as well. And I'll give you a couple of ground rules and then we'll get started. We will have some times for questions. I'm really appreciative for those of you who sent in questions ahead of time. We will be answering those questions either through the presentation or we'll leave some time at the end if we haven't addressed all of them. And I would love to have further questions if something comes up for you as we're chatting. Throw it into the chat and we will answer it. We have a few pauses where we're going to take a look at the questions as they've come in so we can have a further discussion about that. So anytime you think of something, put it in the chat and then we'll get to it when we take our question moment. All right, Chris, let's start this show. Let's go.
Okay, give me 1 second here to screen share. All right.
Love it. Thank you. So welcome to Overcoming Math-Phobia, how to build long-lasting math confidence. And this is something that is extremely important in our lives at this moment and for our children's lives into the future. Let's take a look at our next slide. That's me. Hi, I am Ruth Rumak. I am the founder and executive director of education at Ruth Rumak's Learning Space. And we are a full service academic support center. We are working virtually right now and hope to go back in person soon. Hopefully we can see our kiddos' faces again. We provide a direct instruction pedagogy. We work with students one-on-one. We also provide small group classes, and we do a lot of work that is hands-on, really engaging, dynamic, kinesthetic. We like to get those kids moving so that we get the brain and the body working together. We find it's really the most effective way of learning, and fun too. We're going to tell you more about that as the evening progresses. Let's take a look at the next slide. So we're here today to talk about math. And math is everywhere and it's all around us all the time. This is a quick sort of understanding statistics of how people use math. And we know that 38% of people use basic math 1 to 2 times per week. And I would say basic math would be your 4 operations: adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing, some problem solving, maybe some percents and some fractions, that type of thing. We know that 29% of people use algebra and formulas 1 to 2 times per week. And I bet that you are using an algebra formula maybe even today, and you didn't even know it was an algebra formula. If you were calculating the interest, let's say, on your credit card, or how much interest you've gained on a stock, you're using formulas on a regular basis. And 4% of us use advanced math 1 to 2 times per week. So when a child says, when am I ever going to use this? Well, we know that we are really using math in many ways every single day. Yet, math anxiety persists among students and teachers and really adults in general. I mean, I've talked to many adults who are very math phobic. They had terrible experiences throughout school, and anytime they see numbers, they just want to run away. However, some of those individuals may be math phobic in one thing, but have figured out some workarounds or have figured out strategies that help them get through daily math that make their lives easier, and they've figured it out for themselves. Let's talk a little bit about how we can help. So moving along. What is math phobia? Well, a phobia is a fear. And usually a phobia is an irrational fear. It's something that we cannot control our stress levels around, or we don't think that we can control them. And it's actually not correlated with math ability, which is one of the most important things I think we need to share, which is even if you are math phobic, if you are afraid of math or you have math anxiety, it doesn't mean that you can't do it or that you're not good at it. What it usually means is that you don't believe that you're good at it, or you don't believe that you can do it. So tonight we're going to share some techniques with you that will hopefully help you and your kids get over any of that phobia and that fear that they can't do it, and prove to them that they can enjoy math and they can engage with math in a way that is productive and maybe even fun. Let's move on. So let's talk about the math phobia mindset versus the math confidence side of things. You'll hear these terms, we hear them all the time. I just don't have the math gene. Or a parent will say to their child, don't worry, honey, I didn't get math either. But we do know that somebody who is confident, they may not know the answer right now, but they have the confidence and the curiosity to actually seek out the answer, to try something. They're not afraid to try it and fail if it's getting them to the place that they want to be in the future. Another sort of category of math phobia is looking at thinking that math is a talent, that it's some skill that you're born with that you can't develop, which we know is not true. Giving excuses versus the curiosity of trying to figure out the answer on your own, the idea of giving up quickly or avoiding it, or that fear that wells up in somebody who is math phobic, versus a willingness to try. As I said, even if they don't know the right answer or they don't get the right answer at the beginning, they are still willing to give it a try and persevere through that, what I call the dark, uncomfortable bits. And we've all been there in those moments. Even the greatest mathematicians have head scratching, hair pulling moments where they just are feeling like they're in a deep hole and they're not sure how they're going to get out of it. But it's the confidence behind understanding that they can get out of it that allows them to keep moving forward. And we will too. Let's see our next slide. So we have the idea of a math phobia, fear of math, stress around math, anxiety around math. And then there is something very different, which would be considered dyscalculia, which is an actual learning disability around math. And that is somebody who has difficulty decoding or encoding, which means separating and understanding the concept of numbers, as well as being able to write down the numbers in a way that is logical and makes sense. Different challenges with memorizing, challenging with processing those numbers, figuring out the steps of how to do something and remembering those steps consistently. This situation, this learning disability, affects only 3 to 6% of the population. So it's not very common that somebody would have a learning disability in math, but it does exist. And what we need to do when we're working with our students and when we're parents and we're finding that our kids are having struggles with math is try and decipher, is this a fear? Is this an anxiety or just a lack of understanding because of a lack of good instruction? Or is it really a deeper problem? Something akin to dyscalculia is very similar for math as dyslexia would be for reading. And that it's an actual brain situation, a neurodiversity situation where we have to look at how the brain is working and seeing those numbers and symbols. Let's take a look at the next slide. So the tricky thing about dyscalculia and Math-Phobia is that they overlap. And it's really hard to know what is just anxiety and phobia and what is actually, brain-based challenge. So some of the things that we see in the middle of this Venn diagram, and of course, Venn diagrams are very mathy, so we had to put one of these in, that homework is laborious. It is challenging. There may be tears, there may be sweats, there may be headaches and tummy aches. Kids are going to just walk into it expecting that they're going to fail or not understand, and that we will see on both sides, both for students with a diagnosed learning disability in math and math phobia or math anxiety, that you will have poor marks on tests even after preparation. The difference when we separate them really comes from poor marks because of misunderstanding and not understanding the process of math or being able to follow the process of math versus doing poorly on a test because of the anxiety and the fear that is surrounding the work. We also have two ends of the coin, worrying about a test because you don't understand the material versus worrying about a test even though you understand the material. So a person with math phobia may be very well prepared and very capable of doing the work, but the anxiety prevents them from thinking clearly in that test moment, or just the thought of the test prevents them from thinking clearly. Okay, let's take a look at the next slide. We're going to take a moment, and here I'm going to get some audience participation. So I'm hoping that that you will jump in, all of you participants out there, and help me out with some answers. Okay. So the first thing that I'd like you to put in the chat, if you're willing, is tell me, how does math phobia, stress or anxiety show up in your kids or in yourself if you're talking about yourself? So if anybody has any ideas, any things that they see at home, how does it come up for you at home? While you're thinking about your answers and putting them in the chat, I'll tell you some of the things that we see at Ruth Rumak's Learning Space. There's a lot of defensiveness. I see this in my own home with my daughter who is in grade 7. And she, as soon as you mention math homework or studying for a test, she just gets grumpy and she starts to like dig in and get really sullen and upset, even before we've opened the math workbook. And it's that at that point where I have to use all of my techniques to help move her out of that dark spot, get her out from under the dark cloud, and remind her, you know, how far she's come and where she's going and what we can do about that feeling. And we talk about that feeling too. Let's see. Amy says she hears I'm bad at math or I hate math. And that is like oh, that's like a stab in my heart when we hear kids say, I'm bad at this, or I'm no good at this, or I'll never be good at this, or I hate this. That's even like, oh, because that mindset, and we're going to talk about mindset in a moment, that mindset can really dictate how you move forward in your math studies. And it can make the difference between pursuing a career that needs math as a prerequisite and choosing not to because you have this feeling that you can't do it. Anything else? Does anybody else see any defensive-ness or tears? Anybody have tears at home when the math homework starts? You may see tears. You may see. I often see kids acting very different than they would normally behave in an everyday situation. So kids who are usually very talkative, very bubbly, very happy, will be hiding under the desk, or will just be so withdrawn that they're not talking, they're not moving, they're not blinking, they're just staring because they know that math is about to happen. So it's something that we can turn around. That's the message for tonight. It's that math phobia is something that you can break through, and you can have a different attitude towards math. Okay, so next little interactive piece, some true or false. And feel free to put it in the chat. If you don't feel like putting it in the chat, no worries. We're not going to make anybody type anything in, but I will give you the answers as well. So first question, true or false, men are better at math than women? True or false? Anybody? I'm watching that chat. All right, well, false. Thank you, Althea. Thank you, Amy. We know that this is not true. There's a lot of research that says that there's so much research that supports the fact that that's just a myth and that there's no difference between the sexes. In fact, there was a study that I read many years ago about grade 2 girls and boys. And they did a study to look at perceived math ability and actual math ability. And this was really interesting because the grade 2 girls, at grade 2 already, the grade 2 girls perceived themselves to be less capable at math, but actually did better on test scores than the boys overall in this study. Whereas the boys did worse on their test scores, but perceived themselves to be better mathematicians. So it's all up here for so many of us. It's really the way that we think about it and the way that we're exposed to it and the way that we play with numbers and math concepts. Okay, next one. There is a best way to do a math problem, meaning there's a one good way. What do we think? True or false? There's only one way to do a math problem. False. Althea says, I agree with you that there is no one best way. In fact, that there are many, many ways to get to the same answer. Sometimes having too many options can be confusing for kids, and that causes them anxiety when they know that there are 5 different ways they could get the answer, but they just don't know which one to plug in. In those cases, we often tell the students to stick with one, identify one way of doing that particular question to get yourself to it. But of course, the one way that your teacher does it isn't always the one way that's going to make sense for you. So we can show kids different alternatives if they're open to it. Okay, next one. Math anxiety and fear play a big role in students dropping out of mathematics. True or false? I feel like these are kind of loaded questions. Yeah, true. I mean, that's what we're talking about here, which is the fact that how you feel about it will certainly determine where you go with it. Okay, I'm going to look for one more. It's bad to count on your fingers. True or false? It's bad to count on your fingers. Counting 5, 10, 15, 20 if you're trying to multiply, or anybody? It's bad to count on your fingers. Althea says false. Amy says false. And Mike says, I hope not, because I still do. Yes, good for you, Mike. Good for you. So it's not bad. It's not bad at all. In fact, it's just one other technique. It's another way of getting to the same answer. Some people really have a difficulty memorizing or being able to jump from one, let's say in multiplication, knowing 3 times 8. It's difficult to jump right to that answer. But if they count by 3s or they count by 8s, they're there just as quickly. It sometimes is not as efficient as memorizing, but it still gets you to the same place. So we do not discount finger counting at all. Okay, next. Let's pause for a couple of questions if you have any. Any questions so far or any comments so far? If you do, put them in the chat. I keep looking down because that's where my chat is. If you do, put them in the chat and we will answer them as we go along. Let's look at the next slide. Super. Okay, we've talked about this a little bit. This is all about your mindset. And the mindset is really important because at Ruth Rumak's Learning Space, we believe in a growth mindset. And a growth mindset believes that you may not know something right now, you may not know it yet, but that doesn't mean that you will not find the answer or find the skill to be able to do what you want to do. That is different than a fixed mindset, which is saying, I will never know this, I will never be good at this, I will never get this. And anytime that somebody tries to feed back to me or help me, it's perceived as criticism. Whereas when we look at a growth mindset and we're open to recognizing that we may not know it yet, and it may take some work for us to get there, we are open to constructive and positive feedback. So the feedback that we give our students and our kids is really important. How we model that type of math positive behavior is really important. Even if you don't feel confident with math yourself, the more you can model a positive attitude towards it and that growth mindset of, I don't get it yet, but I will get it. I'm going to keep working at it. The more your children will pick up on that as well. So a couple of things that we want to talk about in this idea of growth mindset. Prevent learned helplessness. So learned helplessness is that idea of, I don't get it. I'm never going to get it. I give up. And somebody's going to do the answer for me or help me get the answer quickly. And I don't have to rely on my own process. So one of the things that we can do as parents is to model that type of open problem solving. And I like to talk my problems out. I like to look at a problem and say, oh, okay, I'm going to read the question, I'm going to read the problem, and then I'm going to talk out loud my thought process so that my student or my child can see, how do I go about thinking about this? I'm going to ask myself, oh, well, what are the key words here? What is the thing I'm being asked to find? All right, I'm going to go back to my little paragraph. I'm going to circle or highlight the part that is the question. What am I trying to find? I might underline the givens or the pieces of the puzzle that I'm going to need to solve this problem. But all the while, it's a running commentary. It's a running dialogue. And I may even ask my child or my student, what do you think is the question here? What do you think we're looking for? Where would I find that answer? So another thing that we want to think about when we're trying to prevent learned helplessness is reminding a student of their own perseverance. And I think often when we are in the middle of anxiety, if we're feeling anxious about something like the math homework, and we start to shut down. In fact, we've seen it in brain scans. We know what happens to the brain when we feel threatened or we feel attacked or we have fear. It's an automatic response, and chemicals are released in the brain that put us into that fight or flight mode. And it's very hard to focus when we have those negative chemicals washing around. And it's also hard to think clearly to follow a process. So we want to remind a student of their own perseverance. We want to get them to take a few deep breaths. If you see that your child is getting overwhelmed, put the pencil down, put the paper down, turn it over, walk away for a minute. And I know Chris is going to talk more about this in a few minutes. We also want to emphasize no, that's not true. Process over product. So it's not just about getting the right answer. We want to really value and celebrate the process that the student uses to get to that answer, even if the answer is wrong. That's okay. If you made a calculation error, that's okay. It's more important that you follow the process and you're using the strategies and techniques that are available for that type of problem. And big one, asterisks, big flashing lights, be patient. Be patient. It is very difficult when your child is melting down and having a fit or hiding under the table when they're 13 years old not to lose your cool. But I implore you, I encourage you, I support you in taking a deep breath yourself as the parent and just saying, okay, it's okay. We got this. I love you. We're happy. We can make our way through this. We're going to take one little step at a time. And if again, you have to stop, take a break and come back to it later, that's probably better than, pushing against something that is creating so much friction that you're being drawn to tears, either one of you, parent or child. Another thing that I would suggest in terms of being there for your kids and modeling a growth mindset is not to do the question for them, not to hold the pencil and show them the answer, but to let them do the writing and let them work through the process with you guiding them. And showing them where to find the information or asking them where they think they might find the information and then pointing them in the right direction. We do, in a growth mindset, want to be ready for and want to encourage a productive struggle. And productive struggle is having the courage to sit in those dark, uncomfortable bits and work through it. But knowing that there will be light at the end of the tunnel because we've been there before. And we have to remind ourselves, right, I felt this way before, but I'm going to work through it because at the end, I'm going to get somewhere. I'm going to get to that place that I'm hoping to get. Okay, I think I've covered a lot about growth mindset and helping our parents not encourage a learned helplessness situation. Let's move on to the next slide. All right, I'm going to hand it over to Chris. Chris, as I said, Chris Scott is our one of our fabulous math experts, and he works with me and our students and really takes them from a place of a fear and loathing of math to a place of delight in math. And it's incredible to watch him work, and he's got some fabulous ideas to share. So over to you, Chris.
Thank you very much. Before I start, actually, I see there's a new comment in the chat, and we may want to field it together.
Let's take a look. All right. It says, I can't see the last one. Hold on. Okay, Mike says, my younger daughter has been diagnosed with dyscalculia. She sometimes grasps the basic principle in a given unit, but as soon as another layer of complexity is added, she gets very frustrated because she feels that she accomplished something, but then it was taken away. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. And I hear that and I feel that because we've seen that many, many, many times. And you're like riding the wave. You get to the crest of the wave and then whoosh, you're just pushed back down again because now there's another layer to go. Dyscalculia is challenging because the math curriculum moves very quickly. And when it moves this quickly, my first response would be she probably needs some outside support on a regular basis in order to keep up as best she can. The other thing, with a diagnosis of dyscalculia, she may have some accommodations that are available to her that would allow her to have, things like a reference sheet for a test or having certain things available to her to follow the process or the steps of the process. We can talk about this, Mike, if you want, at the end of the presentation. I've got some great suggestions for you. But I think reminding her that there is a pattern to this, that this is normal, that she's going to get to a place where she gets it. And then there is going to be another layer that's added on, but we're going to work through that in the same way. And she's going to get that one. And then there's going to be something else that comes along that, she feels also is new. My experience with dyscalculia is that it's like small repeatable steps. And the more that we can practice, and we can practice the same techniques over and over again. And sometimes I have to be honest, it takes a few years to learn a complete concept. I remember working with one student on fractions, and of course it's part of the curriculum every year, but every year it gets a little bit more difficult. So, every year we would practice fractions, we would sort of get to that point, point of saturation, and then we'd have to step back and build up again because we had to add that next level. But perseverance is the name of the game, and being encouraging to her and reminding her that she got it before, she will get it again. That's my long and short answer. Chris, I don't know if you have something else that you want to add to that.
No, I think that really is important. And we'll talk in a little bit. One of the important things about consolidating skills like that is to do them in a way where there's a fun, engageable element to it. It sort of speeds up the ability to get back to the top of that hill, like you were saying, because it is a part of dyscalculia that you're going to have to go through the crests and peaks. The other thing I would say is that I find when a student does have accommodations, another really big element becomes spending less time learning explicitly how to do a math problem and spending time learning how to engage with your reference sheets. So that's an important skill. If you have accommodations, if you're allowed to use this or that reference sheet, it sort of shifts your way of doing math from actually doing the question on the page to knowing how to interact with your resources, which itself is an incredibly important skill and appears plenty in math. So it's in no way unrelated.
And this is a perfect segue. So thank you, Mike, for bringing this up, that our philosophy is let's make it engaging, let's make it dynamic, and let's involve the brain and the body so that we learn in a more holistic and more kinesthetic way. And that actually makes a big difference for memory. And many students who suffer from dyscalculia also have memory, especially working memory issues. And when you're working with a math concept and you can see it and it's visual and it's tactile and you can feel it and see how it works together, that often takes precedence, not precedence, that's not the right word, but it makes it come home and stay longer. We have a better memory for those things that we're actually active in. So Chris is going to show a whole bunch of stuff that's very active for all ages.
Yeah, and just to finish that thought there, when you're doing things in a tactile way or visually or whatever, especially with repetition, it creates new pathways in the brain for that information to be accessed. It's biological on that level.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's open things up a little bit. If anyone wants to drop something in the chat, I already see a new chat comment, so I'm actually going to pull that up right after I say this. A very common question is, when am I ever going to use this math? So if anybody in the chat right now can think of a time when they actually do regularly use it on a daily basis, or even just a time that doesn't come up often, but they find it really, really important, please go ahead and share that now. Oh, you're welcome, Mike. I know for me personally, just thinking through careers, one thing that I always want to emphasize when I talk, especially to adults, about when am I going to use math, is that math shows up on a daily basis in careers and in things that we do around the house. And lots of the times that math is actually basic arithmetic. It's the arithmetic that we're learning in the early years. And that's not to say that as an adult, math is less important. It's to really emphasize the importance of learning math in the early years. So if you're even thinking about being at home, things as simple as trying to plot your garden, trying to reorganize a living room or a kitchen or something, planning a party, there are plenty of things to keep track of there. Inventory, make sure you're measuring and balancing things and budgeting. And then if you're doing art or sports or photography, anything like that, includes lots of thinking about geometry and about relationships in space. And ratios, for instance, the 16:9 ratio of a TV. In careers, there's some more obvious examples: medical technology, lots of important sciences. There's also really important things like carpentry. People think about the fact that carpentry is entirely based around making very precise measurements, adding and subtracting fractions regularly, and architecture as well. And then the last thing that I always like to mention, this does relate to adults directly, is that math is directly connected to logic. And logic helps us to process basic information. We use it every day, just how we reason. And being able to do arithmetic, being able to rearrange sentences that involve numbers and elements is the exact same thing that we do when we make decisions about our beliefs. Is there anything you want to add here, Ruth? Awesome. Okay, so let's get into the guts of this a little bit. What we want to do when we're at RLS is we want to find a way to make math time fun. And what we do a lot of times with our students is we take the content that is causing discomfort and we present it in a way that's enjoyable and gets to the core of the idea as clearly as possible. This often takes the form of breaking procedures into steps. And like Ruth said, finding small accomplishments on those individual steps, which consequently accumulates confidence as we go. And the other thing that we do is when we're breaking into steps and we're choosing these individual skills, we want to target those skills and then consolidate those in an enjoyable way. So an anecdote here, which actually I think Mike relates to you, is that I had a student who had a lot of difficulty remembering his multiplication tables. what we did was we took a deck of cards and we took out the face cards, and we played a game where each of us would throw down a card. We'd have to multiply the numbers together. And the first way we did it was to warm up for him. He would multiply the numbers, and if he got it correct, he got to take a shot with a little mini basketball. So it's just a little tiny reward, and there's really low risk that's involved too. If he does get something wrong, there's no consequence except that he flips another card. When he did get good at it, and he picked up actually over the course of a few weeks quite quickly, what we did was we both flip a card. He would have to get the answer, and I'd have to sink a shot before I got the answer. And so he got a lot better at math, and I was just as bad at basketball the whole time. But it was a really engaging way for him to pick up that skill, and he did consolidate it very nicely over the course of about 2 months. Oh yeah, Ruth, did you want to say something about this?
I was going to say, you know, one of the things that I do at home with my daughter, and we do at the office all the time, is we write in unconventional places. In that, instead of just using a paper and a pencil, we like to write, you know, in our offices, we have glass doors, glass inside big windows, or we have a window. And we take a whiteboard marker and we do our math, or we do our work on the glass. And strangely enough, as simple as that, as taking the work from the flat surface of the desk to the, you know, vertical surface of the window, makes a huge difference. And suddenly kids are standing up and they're moving around and they're doing their drawings, or they're doing their, you know, working out their word problems. And for my daughter, who, you know, as I said, really doesn't, it's not her favorite subject, but if she is going to find some enjoyment out of it, the first thing she says is, well, can we do it on the window? And my answer is, yeah, of course we can do it on the window. No problem. Whatever it will take to get you engaged and get you excited. So anything that you can do that's different, you know, working on the floor, working at a desk, or working in a different room than you would normally work, just find a place that is different and just more engaging.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And just to dig into that, what we really want to talk about now is, it is, of course, great to have fun while we're doing math, but it's not just that doing math or having fun while we do math is a way to distract somebody into doing math as if you're coding a pill and sugar. It plays a really important functional role when we talk about math phobia and math anxiety. Specifically, what we want to do when we're doing something like writing on the windowsill is we want to break up the habits and environment that are encouraging and fostering the anxiety for the student. So I think everybody in this room, in this chat, has a good idea of what the aesthetic is that goes along with math, right? It's 8.5 by 11 ruled paper, a gray pencil, sitting at a desk, looking down, maybe you have a calculator. And when you're sitting in a single chair doing that at a desk, what lots of students don't recognize is that the anxiety they have isn't necessarily just about the math. There's a discomfort that comes along with the entire situation, and they associate that anxiety with the environment. So we want to break that up, and we want to give the student a chance to experience the math apart from their anxiety.
And the success too.
Sorry?
And the success.
And the success, that's right. And like we said before, just getting those small successes along the way is what we're trying to accumulate. That's the goal here, is to add up all those small successes and set up situations so that when the student comes back, they can recall that moment of success and use it as a sort of checkpoint to not start out or step into an anxious moment while they're learning. So doing things, like we said, like writing. Other things that are really important, actually, I found some students, in particular ones with ADHD, can benefit from having a little bit of white noise or rain noise in the background. I can put a link in the chat later to, there's a website where you can actually design your own rain noise. You can control a bunch of different frequencies and add them together to make something nice and calming. And again, it just sort of breaks up the environment to the background. Other things that are really useful, taking frequent breaks and going out of the room to grab something to eat or something to drink. We always encourage students, actually, in addition, to have a snack 15 or 20 minutes before they do math. Very helpful. But anything like this, which gives a student a chance to literally pause and disconnect from what they're doing, but in a way that doesn't distract them and guarantees they're going to come back and pick up where they left off. Very good ways to let the brain press reset and to let the student understand or to let the student, I'm sorry, focus on the math once again and not get locked in on the situation. Another thing that is really useful about doing things like this is that over time, your child's going to understand what works for them. And as they start to build up something that works for them, bear in mind, some students are going to find a setting that works and want to stick with that. Other students, is actually very common, will want to do something different very regularly. Some students prefer variety, and that's okay. But as they go, they're essentially building their own gauge and developing a background of experiences for what makes them comfortable. And in contrast to that, they can start to understand what habits have been making them uncomfortable. Which ones are they associating that is encouraging this anxiety every time that they want to come back to math? So children will do this automatically, but also it's great to have a conversation once in a while with your child to make sure, or to ask if they have considered these things or to reflect. A good rule of thumb that I find for doing breaks, I do about 5 minutes for every 25 to 30 minutes. That's maybe a little bit more for like an intermediate level or an older level. With younger students, especially if they're doing something which is one specific problem, they can do that problem and then go take a very quick break, do that problem and take another quick break. And the breaks can typically be a little bit shorter. Yeah, that's most of what I wanted to say here. The really important part at the very end is to make sure that you're listening to what your child wants, and also just keeping an eye on what it is you see works for your child. And together you'll find a way to make it so that students have something to come back to that they feel comfortable with when they're doing math. Okay, now in terms of making things interactive, we have some tools that are very affordable and very versatile. If we're looking at the primary and junior years, there's some absolute classics, the base 10 blocks, which I think maybe even a lot of people here grew up using. And they also have those huge, the 1,000 cubes, if you remember those. They're fun for building, they're fun for comparing, they're fun for even making just little structures with. We also have the fraction strips. These ones are great for comparing the sizes of different fractions and thinking about equivalent fractions. So very literally comparing 1/6 to 2/12 or something like that. And then a really big favorite is the Judy Clock. And Ruth actually wanted to speak here because we had a specific question about teaching time.
We did. So the Judy Clock is this, it's about this big. I don't have mine here, it's at the office, but it's not small. So it's nice and large. You can see all the components. And you can see in the picture, there are gears inside. And the thing that's special about the Judy Clock for telling time that's different than just taking, cardboard with one of those butterfly clips and putting 2 arms in it, is that the gears inside actually connect. So as you move the minute hand around, and you'll see there's a little dial or a little holder, a little handle on that longer minute hand. As you move that around the clock, you can actually see how the hour hand adjusts. And this, somebody asked me, how do you, for a child who's having real difficulty learning time and the concept of time, I think making it as visual as possible and tactile as possible is going to be the way to make it work. So let's say if I had, my minute hand, my hour hand at 10, and I had my minute hand at the 12 representing the top of the hour, and you have your child pull that. You see my good mime skills? Everybody notice that? You're pulling that minute hand and watching it move, and you're going to see how far it moves every minute or every 15 minutes or every half an hour. And because it is calibrated so that it moves in tandem, you can see that when you have gone 30 minutes, that hour hand is between the 10 and the 11, which means that it's halfway between the 10 and the 11. So it's a way of breaking down the concept of how time moves. It's visual and it's kinesthetic, and your child can experiment. And kids are just fascinated by actually watching the things move, the gears inside move, and also the hands move. That's been one of our go-to things to help understand time. I'm looking around for my time timer, which is not in my reach, but it's another timer where you move the dial there, and then there's a red film that shows how much time you have, and then it counts backwards. So it's showing you how much time you have left. And that's another good visual of, okay, this is what 15 minutes feels like. This is what half an hour feels like. And they can see it moving. You can also get these not just in real form, but you can get them online. Check out the timed timer with an ED at the end. And this one is called the Judy Clock. So if the person who asked about telling time is around now, stick around after and we can talk more technique afterwards. But again, it's just a matter of making it visual, making it kinesthetic, making it hands-on, giving the student a chance to participate in how it works and to see the pattern.
Absolutely. And there's one thing that I really want to add on to what you said there. You're correct that it has to be tactile and engageable. And experimental is really important. And the other thing that's really important that goes along with that is that you'll notice with any of these interactive tools, you can interact with them in a way that has no success or failure expectation. Yes. And especially when you're trying to interact with a new topic, it's really important for a student to enter into it, not wondering if they're going to succeed or fail, or particularly if they have a math phobia, not worrying that they're going to fail. So with something like a Judy Clock, you can just move the handles on it. Nothing happens. You don't win or lose. With the fraction strips, you can just fiddle. And the more that you do that, implicitly, you are acquiring understanding of the objects and consequently the mathematical concepts they represent. But you don't have to do it in a way where if it works out or doesn't work out, it affects you as an individual.
I love that, Chris. I think that the removing the correct answer when you're just at the beginning, when you're introducing something, when you're just getting your, dipping your toe into the water, that is the best way to do it. And in fact, if you know, here's another way to combat the phobia, and this works for all ages. If you have prior knowledge from the teacher, what the upcoming unit will be, and you can pre-teach or preview some of the main concepts at home in a relaxed way, whereas Chris said, there is no right or wrong answer, we're just exploring. This really decreases anxiety. And this is something that we do at Ruth Rumak's Learning Space all the time. We pre-teach the concept so that the student goes back into class recognizing some of the vocabulary. That is huge. If you can take a few minutes, a day to lead up to, let's say, 3 or 4 days in advance of a new unit, and you can introduce what, say you're doing fractions, what a numerator and a denominator is. And you can talk about those words and you can show them, and the student goes in knowing that vocabulary. That can be a game changer, because often it's the vocabulary the new vocabulary that trips somebody up, that gets them worried or that alerts their brain, oh, this is new and I don't like something new. But if they can have a prior knowledge to it, it takes that anxiety out. It's like, when I go to the dentist, I like to know exactly what they're going to do inside my mouth before they do it. And that reduces my anxiety. So she tells me, I'm going to put a cotton ball here, and then I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to do that, and you're going to feel a little bit of a buzz, but it helps me because I don't like going to the dentist. But if I know what's coming up, I'm prepared, and my anxiety is already decreased. So pre-teaching is a huge strategy that we use, and I encourage you to use it as well, especially Absolutely. Focusing on vocabulary.
Yeah, vocabulary for sure. Yeah, absolutely. So I won't spend too much time talking about these, but I'm sure everyone else has seen bingo counters, the deck of cards, and the classic play money set. All of these have plenty of applications. Like I said, I used war for this one. You can also play Go Fish is a really big one, or you can work with doubles, lots of opportunities. And for early years, we also have lots of things that you can do to build arrays or to physically represent a problem, such as addition. And you can really use any of these things for any purpose. The M&Ms can be used for this as well. Gummy bears are fantastic, but I find that I end up eating too many of my questions. The Lego fractions are awesome as well. So Lego, just because of the way that they're constructed, they lend themselves to representing fractions, because
I like the color coding of it too.
Yes, the color coding is really awesome. And actually, we'll see in a little bit, I'll show you an interactive that I use for my upper level students online, which is basically just this, but in an online interactive form. Yeah, so all of these are, again, very easy, and their applications are very obvious, I think, right off the bat, and also you can get creative with them. Toy money, though, let's talk about that for 1 second, because this one is a really good one for addition, subtraction, and multiplication in particular. I had a student in grade 5 who loved to play a game where we would set up a store and she would pick out of the room 5 items just in the room that she wanted to sell me. And I forget exactly what all of them were, but what she does is she puts a price on each one, and then I ask for a certain number of each of them. She has to multiply the prices of them together, add them all up. She was actually very good at it. So I challenged her to calculate the tax as well, and she managed to. And then I give her money, and she decides how much change I get. I think in this store, she sold me an old soccer ball and a bunch of bananas for like $265. So we learned a lot there, but I wouldn't go back. But that's a really fun one. And I find especially in the earlier years, kids love doing that game. And then cooking is another huge one. Cooking is a lot of fun, again, because you end up spending so much time thinking about the actual cooking itself that you don't really think about the math when it shows up. But the math can present itself in such ways as looking at unit prices when you're going to buy the ingredients, converting between metric and imperial units. You can hide one measurement cup and you can have other ones used to measure out ingredients equivalently. So you can have a 1 cup measurement and you can put in different numbers of third cups until you fill it up, anything like that.
Can I jump in, Chris?
Yes, go ahead.
I want to share something. My dad, and this is true story, when we used to go to the grocery store, and I don't know, you mentioned unit price. I don't know how many people know that when you go and you look on the tag on the shelf at the grocery store, it gives you the price of the item, and there's like a barcode. But if you look really carefully, there is something called a unit price, or a price per 100 grams, or it's a standard amount. And my father used to make me compare different prices and different sizes of items and do the math for the unit price for each one to decide which one was the better deal. So if something, the unit price was, 29 cents per 100 grams versus 18 cents per 100 grams, even though that second one was a bigger package and I was paying more, he really showed me the value of looking at it as a price per unit. And it's something that I do with my daughter as well. And it's something that I think anybody could do in the grocery store if you've got an extra 2 minutes.
Absolutely. Yeah, unit prices are incredibly important, and they are on there. I didn't know that until much later in my life too, actually. So the next slide that we have here, I'm sorry, now the version I have on my slides is acting funny. There we go. So using in home improvements, I spoke about this a little bit before too. This of course comes down to having an actual measuring tape with you and measuring the lengths of things and seeing how they fit into a larger space. If you need to get multiples of something, multiplying those together, framing, things like that. Ruth, it says here that you actually wanted to speak about someone in your family who was recently doing renovations.
I do. And I'm just going to go. Althea just said that she just did that last night with a taco mix. Yay.
Nice.
Excellent. I hope you shared it with your kids and not just to yourself, kept it to yourself. I was going to say that, one of the things I did with my daughter at the beginning of the pandemic, when we knew that summer camp was canceled and she wasn't going to go anywhere and we weren't going anywhere, she'd been begging me to redo her room. And I said, okay, we're going to redo your room, but there's some strings attached. She had to come, I gave her a budget, a certain number of dollars. She had to come back with the items, her wish list of items, and then cost them all out. So she brought me a spreadsheet. And then she had to negotiate, because she was obviously well over budget. And I said, that's it. We're only spending this amount. And when we get to the end of the dollars, that's the end of the renovation. So she actually thought about it a lot in terms of, I know that I need $50 for paint. And I know that I really want this, this nightside table. So she was willing to give one thing up in order to get the thing that she really wanted and stick within that budget. But it was fabulous because she took ownership of it and she did all the math of it. And as I said, she does not love math. So it was one of those ways where we snuck it in, and she felt very successful, and she owned the project, which was really, that for her confidence was terrific.
Awesome. Yeah, that's hitting all the beats that we talked about, right? Making sure the student feels that they can be connected, making sure they feel that they can gain success by eventually coming to a conclusion, and also fundamentally experimenting. Again, there's no failure in choosing to take this over that, but she still has to engage with the mathematical concept either way.
Yeah, love it.
So for upper years, actually Ruth's anecdote there, I think, really touched on a lot of what is a good way to get started, which is that you can have your child take on some sort of financial responsibility. And oftentimes you'll see that incentivizes a child a lot to think about just how much that dollar is worth. So something like a home renovation, or even starting a small business. I have a grade 10 student who recently started buying Lego Star Wars pieces, and he's hand painting them and selling them himself. So we may take a little bit of time out of a lesson in the future to talk about exactly how he wants to budget that. Getting a credit card is a really big one. And then one that I personally love is planning either a family meal or a day trip. It would be very much like what Ruth said there. So setting a budget for your child and then inviting them to come back with a specific itinerary or inventory, about how that day is going to go and how the money is going to be broken down. Anything like that is a really good way, of course, to get your child to buy in a way that has no success or failure. And another one that I think is really important, this one, of course, is a family decision, is to suggest to your child that they look at even a bigger purchase, something like maybe a guitar or something. And the reason why this one's fantastic is because if you look online, there are plenty of financial calculators that can do things like annuities, which is when you're constantly investing some money into an account, like a savings account, and getting compound interest off of it, or something like a payment plan, which you can do even for a guitar through somewhere like Long McQuaid, a local music store. And either way, you can encourage your child to go online and plug in the different values, however many years their payment plan is going to be, or however many months, what the interest rate is through that store. And they can take a look at not only what are they going to have to pay on a regular basis, but the thing I love about doing this one is that they'll eventually see just how much more money they spend when they're doing a compound interest payment over a long time, or how much money they'll save if they're planning long into the future. Which of course is also just very beneficial if they're young to start saving with a compound interest account right now. That's where they're going to get the most money. So this one I found has been really successful as well. And now I do want to do a little bit of interactives for you, because I know that with the older years, the math gets so abstract that it's difficult to use something like M&Ms or Lego to accurately represent the problem that you're doing. Fortunately, there are lots of people who have addressed this, and there are a lot of really good resources online nowadays. So the first thing is called Desmos. Desmos is just an online graphing calculator, and it's really fun for just interacting with simple topics. Y equals mx plus b, in case anyone is aware, is how you write a straight line in math. And you can control these numbers, the number m and the number b, and you can see how it changes the line. In particular, if I toggle this number m, look at what I'm doing. I'm tilting my line. And if I toggle this number b, I'm shifting it up and down. Really nice way to interact with it without any expectations. You can go on the internet and quickly find some things called parent functions, very simple functions that you can then start to fiddle with randomly and see what happens. Look at that, I can move it up, I can move it way up, I can flip it the other way, I can move it to the left and right. I can do lots of different things to this, and just engaging with it is a great way to start to understand. These are what are called transformations of a function.
Can I jump in for a second?
Yeah.
I was just speaking to a grade 11 student who is doing functions. He's doing the first year of functions course. He's on the spectrum and a very, very bright individual, but he really needs things to be visual. And when he's just sitting and listening, the ADHD kicks in and he just kind of loses track of where we are. And so I was showing him, he was working on exactly this unit on transformations, and looking at what he brought from school, it was all paper and pencil, all graphs that he had to hand draw. Well, for somebody who has very challenge, he has a great challenge with fine motor control. He has dysgraphia. It was really hard for him to make those graphs clearly and neatly. But when we went on Desmos and he could punch it in and he could see how the things changed, how changing the X to a negative X, how that changed the graph, or adding the 4 or subtracting the 4 changed the graph, suddenly pop, like it totally made sense to him. And this is where, he was getting anxious that he wasn't getting it. But what I was telling him and what this proved to him was that he can get it. He does get it. He just needed it to be shown in a different way.
Absolutely. Another thing that I find with students who have difficulty drawing graphs is that they'll be uncomfortable with their answers because they don't know if their graph is right. Desmos gives you very nice and clean, concise statements about the maximums and minimums of these guys and any point in between. And I had a student actually just yesterday who had ADHD who was doing this question where he had to multiply this thing and this thing together. And it's a very abstract idea until you look at it visually. And you see how what's going on here is we have this blue guy that's being fit into this red envelope. That's what we're looking at right here. And it didn't quite click for him until he went into the settings and he tweaked these to look exactly the way he wanted. But when he looked at it like this, all of a sudden it was like balls. So Desmos is fantastic because it hits all the beats that a graphing calculator needs to, and it does it with a really nice aesthetic and artistic options that invite any kid to see it the way that they want to see it. I just want to share this with you very quickly, but Desmos actually has an art contest where if you are really, really committed, you can make fantastic pictures on their graphing calculator. And this folder right here, just to give you an idea of how complex this is, this folder is just the head of one of the giraffes. Whoa. All this information right here, just that little section right there. This one is a contest winner, so very remarkable. But I also
we should print that out and put that up at the office with the calculations underneath.
Yeah, that would take up probably a whole wall, but it would look really good. The other one that I really love, this one would be harder to print, I guess. Someone actually made moving bubbles on their jellyfish program. And if you come take a look at the bubbles down here, those things that I was doing with the M and B, they've got them varying back and forth. So lots of fiddling going on here and lots of experimentation, again, that gets the student to buy in without having any expectations. Yeah, and for whatever reason, Desmos ended up using this as their personal way to introduce the topic. So I just wanted to come in here and show you that there are lots of nice ways through what we're learning today to take that anxiety and turn it into something positive.
Beautiful.
Thank you. That was a corny joke, but I wanted to sell it anyways. The other thing I wanted to show you here, Desmos has, as of recently, a huge catalog now of completely separate interactives that deal with a variety of concepts. Some that are really good for trigonometry in grade 9 as well, or grade 9 and 10, excuse me, as well. This one I love is a representation of how a position time graph works. And this little graph right here, if I go ahead and click play, tells me where my turtle is as time goes along. And now he's going to sprint up to the short and I'll back up a little bit. And this topic, it underpins a lot of basic understanding how functions work, which in consequence underpins the whole grade 11 and 12 curriculums. So this interactive I use a lot.
It really is amazing to me how rich the resources are for us. And when you know where to look and you play around with it a little bit, you can really create things that, I mean, I never ever had these things as a student. It was really just textbook, board, and paper. That's it. And you had to figure it out.
Absolutely. And as someone who has a perspective of knowing, having a very good idea what specific hurdles students are going to encounter, going through these sorts of interactives and seeing that it was clearly made by someone who knows the exact same hurdles and targeted how to get over them, whether or not you can see that, they're going to have a very good effect on your students. I get very positive responses from these. The last thing I wanted to show you is the University of Colorado actually has a ton of fantastic interactives. They were down for a little bit when, what was it, Java, I think, closed down or whatever it was, but they switched them all over. So they all work now in HTML. And I'll just scroll real quick to show you what lots of them do. We are over time, so I wanted to do a couple examples. I think I'll cut one of them short. But you take a look here, we have things like graphing lines. I was toggling that on Desmos. This interactive gives specific numbers and lets you manipulate those. You can do probability. You can even do physics on this page. There are whole pages for physics, chemistry, and earth science and biology. And just to briefly, quickly show you what sort of thing this can do, this is what I was talking about that very much resembles the Lego arrays we were looking at. And in grade 10, students are going to do something called foiling. They're going to learn how to multiply something that has a variable in it and also has a number attached. They're going to have to multiply that by another thing that has a variable in it and some sort of number attached. And this representation right here is going to show you that that big expression can be broken apart into 4 different parts. And those 4 different parts, if we want to multiply them together, it looks like these 4 different problems right here. You'll notice that each of these corresponds to one of the boxes on the page. If you carry through all that work, you can see the total area is this guy here. I love this one. It makes that idea, that really abstract idea of what is this and what is this even, it gives you a concrete framework within which to understand what's actually happening.
Don't worry, parents, if you don't remember how to do this. There is no test. And like we said, there's no right or wrong answer right now. So no anxiety here at the end of our presentation.
No, that's right. And just go experiment yourself a little bit. You'll pick up lots of it. Those things lend themselves very nicely to anyone who's willing to just sit down and fiddle. And that is what I had to talk about, Ruth. That's what I wanted to share.
Thank you so much. I mean, I love to see these things in action. You can see I'm getting excited about it. I just wanted to share with you, our participants, a little bit more about what we are. You know, because we are online right now, we can really work with students anywhere in the world. We work on developing confidence, applying those concepts, following step-by-step process. And for those students with anxiety, dyscalculia, phobia, resistance, hesitancy around math, that's the key. It's really breaking it down to smaller pieces, repeatable pieces that they feel comfortable with till they figure out their own pattern, and then helping them to put it back together. Even if that takes a really long time, the point is to do it in a methodical scope and sequence type of way. The thing that I love about the way that we work is it's this idea of continuous review, the customized lessons, the concrete visuals, as we were showing today, lots of interactive technology. And we are very fortunate now that we're online and we have all of these resources to pull from. It really makes those lessons come alive. And it's not just two talking heads with a pen and a paper, but we're doing all kinds of different things. So if you have any further questions about particular students, or if it's something that we would work with, we do work with students with all types of challenges, diagnosed learning challenges or undiagnosed, ADD, ADHD, anything on the autism spectrum, etc. So we will stick around for some further questions. But let's take a look at our last two slides, I think. We have many online group classes as well for all ages. And that includes everything from grade 1 through to grade 3, early math concepts, to math boosters, which would be reviews and previews for grades 4 to 6. Problem solvers, which was junior, which is also grades 4 to 6. We really teach explicitly how to solve word problems, what teachers are looking for, how to answer the question in a succinct and calculated way, following the same pattern each time for different questions. And then Power Solvers Senior, which is for grade 7 and 8. We've got more on the next slide, I think, or not?
Yeah, let me just say quickly, the power solvers are actually a lot of fun to teach. So if you could fill those courses up, I get to do them over the summer and I would love that.
Wonderful. And then we've got overviews of grade 7, grade 8, grade 9, grade 10, and grade 11, so that we're really making sure, especially since we've been through the pandemic, I think these are things that you might want to think about for the summer. Because we know that our kids are going to have some gaps, especially with this in class, not in class, virtual, in person. And a lot of kids have checked out, unfortunately, and they just need a little hand holding and a little filling in of the gaps before they get to the next year. So we're definitely available for that. And we will be running those classes throughout the summer as well. And who knows, Chris might even be teaching those too.
I probably will.
Probably will. Yeah. What's our next one? So this is just your key takeaways. To wrap up, we want to acknowledge that math phobia is real. We want to model a growth mindset for our children. We want to remind our kids that there will be periods of darkness and uncomfortableness, but it's a short period of discomfort till we get to the next level, till we level up. And then we're going to have to go through those things again and then level up again. Really encourage persistence. Don't forget to take breaks when you need to, take deep breaths, give your kids a hug when they're feeling anxious, and remind them that they can get through this and that you're there for them. Ask guiding questions, use some of the techniques that we shared today to make it fun, and to share how you use math in your life every day. I know Mike put into the chat how he uses math in his everyday life. Thank you for sharing that. And to try some of our everyday math ideas at home. See if you can sneak them in when you're at the grocery store, or making dinner, or baking a birthday cake. See, even when you're playing Lego, what you can do with that. So I will say we're going to stick around for a few minutes if you have some extra questions. But if you do have to go, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, Chris, for all your great ideas. And
thank you for having me.
Mike says, oh, what does Mike say? Let's see. My daughter did 1 week of summer camp at your Spadina Blur location, and it was amazing. Can't wait for you to reopen in-person camps. Thank you so much, Mike. That is so validating. We love to hear that. And David says, have to run, but thanks so much for this. Looking forward to other upcoming webinars. Thank you for that segue, because the next one that we're doing is next week. Actually, it's called oh my goodness, brain cramp. It's all about
Parent power.
Parent power. Thank you. I knew it was a power in there. Thank you so much. Parent power is all about navigating the world of accommodations and modifications when your child has specific learning needs, and how to ask for what you need and how to get what you need for your kids. So join us next week for that. And we've got a whole library of other webinars. Anytime you want to, you can just go into our resources page on our website, ruthrumak.com, and find lots of interesting things. So thank you once again, and have a wonderful evening. We'll stick around and see if anybody has questions. Oh, Althea says another amazing session. Thank you so much. We love to hear comments. We love to know that we're not just sending out information into the abyss. Heather says, thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Heather, for joining us too. Does anybody have any questions? I wonder if there was anything that came up around accommodations, or, working with your teacher, students with your kids' teachers, or your special ed teachers. I'll give it a moment if anybody has anything to say, if anybody wants to chat. No. All right. Who's still around? Let's see. Oh, you guys are still here. I see you, Cameron and Mike. I see you there. Anything else we can help you with tonight? We are all ears. Let's see. I got one new message. Quick question. Yes, Mike. Do you want to be on screen, or do you want to type it? Because we can, you can unmute you, I think, somehow.
I think he's typing.
Dun, dun, dun. What are your opinions on using a calculator in class if a kid has dyscalculia? Please do.
Yes.
Please do.
Yes.
No question about it. Definitely use a calculator. Here's the thing. Our brains, especially as students get older, and I think, did you say that your daughter was 12? Is that right? I think so. Yeah, 9. Okay, 9. So 9, grade 4. I'm guessing probably grade 4. Here's the thing. Grade 4 is a really big transition year for math, huge transition year for math. And what happens is that all of those early operations, adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing, now, as your daughter is experiencing, they're leveling up and they're adding more complexity. And when you are going from, let's say, multiplying 1 digit by 1 digit, 6 times 4, and then you get you have to do 64 times 34, you now have, instead of 1 digit by 1 digit, you have 2 digit by 2 digit, which is a whole other process. And if we can help that child's brain take some of the load off by, instead of having to remember the steps of stacked multiplication, instead of getting lost in, okay, what is 4 times 4? Okay, that's 16, but where do I put the 16? Oh, I got to put the 6 here and carry the 1. Oh, okay, well, now what am I doing? And then they get lost. Instead of having to take the time to overload on the pure multiplication, just the computation, use a calculator. But you have to teach her how to use it correctly, and you have to teach her how to check her work. Because when you use a calculator, if you're using it too quickly, your fingers are going in the wrong place. You may be using the right process, but you make an error, and it's just a calculation error. But then that calculator isn't helping you, and then she's going to get frustrated with the calculator. So
right. You'll still want to be comfortable with the rules of BEDMAS too if you use the calculator.
Yes, that's right. You have to use the proper math rules. At grade 4, she'll be okay probably, but in the future, yes, all of those other math rules apply. But at the same time, you want to make sure you're using the calculator appropriately. And it is something that you can ask for as an accommodation, that she should be allowed to use a calculator on all tests and all exams. And especially you want to get that in her IEP for grade, like before grade 6, if she's transitioning to a new school for grade 7, or before grade 8 if she's transitioning to a high school for grade 9. So start working on it early. Yes, 100% support that. Take the load off. She has an IEP, but since COVID, we've lost, most or all of in-class supports. I am so sorry to hear that. I know how difficult that is. Haven't met with the SS team, so I feel like the dialogue between myself and the school has fallen apart. I hear you. I hear you. And actually, if you wanted some consultation from us in terms of how to put together an IEP or your list of requests, you can always give us a call and we can consult with you, and we can do that as a separate thing, parent, just parent and parent to us. But getting those accommodations in place, it's really difficult when you're knocking on the door and nobody's answering. I fully support that frustration. And I would hate to say we're only in January. I don't want to say just leave it, wait till next year, because that's another year gone. I always say you catch more flies with honey than you do with vinegar. So if you do have a contact in the school and there is somebody that you do have a good relationship with, to at least have a conversation with and share your concerns, start that conversation now, because even if nothing official happens, at least you've started the conversation and you have something to go back to. So Mike, I don't know if you have come to our Parent Power Workshop before, but Jen Makwana, who is our, trying to think of her official title. Okay, somebody else can help me out with her official title, but she's been with me for like 14 years. And she has been instrumental in helping parents understand IEPs and advocate for themselves. And she herself is a parent of 2 kids with very different special needs from each other, or exceptionalities. So she not only, walks the walk, but she talks the talk and she walks the walk. So if you are free next week, I believe it's the same time, Tuesday, you should definitely join us, because she gives really great suggestions, and would love to. Oh, if you haven't come to the Parent Power, come, because it'll be really valuable for you.
Yeah, Jen is fantastic. I've learned a lot from Jen.
She just knows so much.
I believe she's the Director of Education. Is that her title?
She is, I don't remember.
One of you two is listed as the Director of Education. The other,
I am the Executive Director, so she is probably the Director of Educational Operations. That's what it is. There you go. That's what she is, Director of Educational Operations. But regardless of her title, she is a parent and she is an incredible educator, and she's going to walk us through many parts of the IEP process. And, we do research for this. We give this Parent Power Talk every year, sometimes twice a year. We did it in the fall. We're doing it again now. And we're always adding new pieces as we learn them and as things change. And the pandemic has really thrown things for a loop. And you are not alone in not having contact with the right team. Can I provide the link for the Parent Power webinar next week? Yes. Joelle, is Joelle still around? She should be. Joelle, if you can stick that in, super. Can you put the link in? It's on our website under, well, you know where it is, Joelle, because you put it there. But there we go. She's going to grab it for you, Mike. Any other questions? Cameron, what are your thoughts and comments? What did you take from tonight? I'm looking at you. I know you're still there. I can see you. All right, there is the Parent Power Workshop. And Cameron says, just struggling with a grade 2 boy with troubles in math. Great tips, thank you. Grade 2 is, it's so funny because they're so full of life. And they can be so emotional, and they can be like right in there and just having a great old time, and then be really upset and like take a giant leap back and shut down. So I think, if I'm going to send a few words of encouragement, is really have fun with it yourself and try some of these techniques, just simple counting. What is your child into? Does he like Lego? Does he like dinosaurs? Does he like a particular video game? Try and find what he's interested in and use those pieces as examples or as actual tangible, working pieces. So if he likes Lego, take out the Lego set, but not just to build, but categorize it by color and get him to count how many are in each group, or make a bar graph of how many red Lego pieces versus blue Lego pieces versus yellow Lego pieces. And those Lego pieces, I don't have any with me, but we know what they look like, right? They have big win this week with units and tons with Lego. Exactly.
Yeah.
Like if you look at the dots on the Lego, they each have different number of dots. So if you are working, let's say, on counting by twos, oh, wonderful. Mike just registered. Awesome. If you're working on counting by twos and you take those little pieces, the tiniest pieces, well, I guess not the single pieces, but the two piece with the two dots, and you line them all up, and then you touch them and you count 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. It's tactile, it's visual, he can see it. You could even put different colors for each one so he can visually separate each group of 2. And then you could add the single piece next to the 2 piece, and now you have a group of 3, and you can count 3, 6, 9, 12. You can also take that and take a ball and just practice. We call that skip counting, where you're counting by a certain number, and just throw it back and forth, 2, and then he throws it back to you, 4, 6, 8, etc. So he's engaged, and it's fun, and he's hearing it, and he's saying it, and he's doing it. And keeping all those modalities in mind will help to increase his engagement and also increase his understanding of the concept. And
Right.
if you're not with us already, you can look into the type of support that we provide as well. Over to you, Chris.
Sorry, the other thing that I'd want to say is I just want to remind you that what we're really looking at here is it's a long game. We're not trying to do something where we're expecting to get results right away, especially with students who have this sort of discomfort. What you can do to support them is not hand them comfort with math. You can build an environment within which they can become comfortable with math. And that is incremental, and it's repetitive. It means bringing in habits that they can experience over and over again. And after a long period of time, they will associate those with math instead. So overall, if you're trying to think about the trend of your child, you don't want to think about just the low points or just the high points. You want to think about how those sort of peaks and troughs are trending. Are they going in a positive direction? And when you see those positive opportunities, the peaks, try and celebrate those, accentuate them, and bring something from them that your child can remember later.
Yes, yes. It's like putting a pin in it, right? Like you want to put a pin in that memory so that they can refer back to it when they're in a tougher spot, and you can go, oh, but remember when we cracked the code of counting by twos? You can do it. And I know you can do it for threes also.
That's right. And they'll vault back up gradually as you do that.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. I think we're good to wind up unless there are any other questions. Thank you so much, Cameron. And I hope to see you at our next webinar or another webinar in the future.